Now, the third situation that Ross deals with is where, I'm going to put it over here, the conjunction vav is not, and I stress not, like the inseparable prepositions. Okay? Here is where they are most definitely not like the inseparable prepositions. The first thing is when I have, let me make sure I'm lining up here with, I want to make sure I do this in the same order he does. When I have a word that begins with a vocal shava, but not like with Judah. Remember, I started with a yod with a vocal shava. Okay, this is the only exception to what we're dealing with. If I have a yod with a vocal shava, it doesn't follow this rule. Any other word with any other consonant with a vocal shava under it, and I'm adding a v in front of that. Okay, you know that Hebrew's not going to be allowed to keep that together. So what am I going to see happen instead? The most natural thing that you would expect is the typical Red Rider solution, right? Which is to shoot out this I and have this shava become silent here. But in fact, that is not what Hebrew does. What Hebrew does in this case is Hebrew changes the entire pointing to a shurik. All right? So v just becomes a shurik, and the vocal shava does not change. It stays put. Okay? So let's take a look at a couple of examples. Let's talk about Shemuel. Remember good old Shemuel? Who's that? That's Samuel. And I want to not just say Samuel, I want to say and Samuel. How will I do that in Hebrew? Add the vav, add the vocal shava, but wait a minute, Shemuel already has a vocal shava, right? So what do? I repoint the vav with its vocal shava and make it which vowel? A shurik. Now, once I do that, my shava is in the middle of the word. If I look to the right, I see what kind of a vowel, a long or a short vowel? Yeah, shurik is long. Yea, verily, yea, it's historically long, isn't it? And therefore my shava is still vocal, isn't it? So it's going to be pronounced U-Shalomo. I'm sorry, U-Shemuel. U-Shemuel. Say that with me. U-Shemuel. Now that vowel pointing does create a situation that we have told you cannot do in Hebrew. Because if you remember, when we have a vocal shava, we are going to divide our vocal shava where? To the right or to the left? We always divide vocal shavas to the right. And that sheen is going to go with the next syllable, which means I have hanging out all by itself what letter? Shurik. And that is a vowel, right? I have a syllable that is constituted by a vowel with no lead consonant in front of it. This is the only place that you're going to have this situation, is when the conjunction vav becomes a shurik. It will do this, okay? So it's special. It's special that way. Okay? Now, that's what happens when I add a vav to a word that's already got a vocal shava under the first consonant. The other, and this of course is very different from our inseparable prepositions, right? Because we don't change our vav to a shurik. We don't change our vocal shava to some crazy shurik pointing. So that's not like the inseparable prepositions. Another way that the vav is not like the inseparable prepositions has to do with this. If I have any Hebrew word that begins with a bet, a mem, or a pei, and some people refer to this as the bump rule. Okay, the bet is the B, the mem is the M, the pei is the P. If I have a word beginning with a bet, mem, or pei, and I want to put a vav conjunction in front of it, Hebrew doesn't like to point the vav that way either. It will change to a shurik. So the vocal shava will go away, and we will dot it right here, and it becomes a shurik. So it'll be v, whatever, or uma, or p, or ufa. Okay? So let's take a look at a couple of examples here. We have a word like melech. What does melech mean? King. Okay. I want to say and a king. Put my vav, put my vocal shava. Under normal circumstances, that would be okay. But is mem one of the bump consonants? It is. And therefore, I have to rewrite my shava with not a vocal shava, but with the pointing for a shurik. So it's going to be melech. Just like that. Melech. And a king. Say that with me. Melech. Melech. So now, what's going on here? Why is the vav doing this? You might think, well, they're just conspiring to make Hebrew hard for me. Well, not really. Not really. Let me explain to you why I think this happened. Remember, when we transliterated a vav, we transliterated it with a W symbol, right? And that's because originally, I believe, the sound of the vav was not v, wasn't the V sound, but w. Okay? It was a w sound. And if Hebrew originally had a vav sounding like a w, then when you had one of these consonants, bet, mem, or pei, okay, these are called bilabial consonants. These are the bilabials. What's bi mean? It means two. Labials, lips. What does it take to produce a bet, mem, or pei? It takes two lips, doesn't it? You don't believe me? Try to pronounce a B sound with one lip. Go ahead, do it. It's like the sound of one hand clapping, right? Except you can always clap one hand that way. But you can't produce a bet, mem, or a pei with one lip. Okay? It doesn't work. You got to use two. So they're bilabials. Well, think about this for a minute. If a vav was originally a w sound, what does it take to pronounce the w sound with a vocal shava? W. What are you using to pronounce the w? You're using your two lips. Now, to pronounce the bet, which direction do your lips have? Both of your lips have to go to create a bet. But. You've got to close the lips, right? To pronounce the w, which direction are your lips headed? They're opening. They're moving away from each other, right? W. So what happens is you've got two opposite motions trying to happen in contiguous sounds right next to each other. Wub. Okay? And in language, we tend to follow what I like to call the principle of linguistic laziness. That is to say, our mouths will start to do what is the easiest for them to do as they're anticipating the next sound. And in this situation, w, b becomes oo, v, right? It's a lot easier to round your lips like you're going to do a w, but instead of opening, you just keep closing them. Oob, ooh. Not wub, right? But oof. So probably the pay without the dagesh lene was truly a bilabial sound, but you're blowing air through a f, right? But we use our teeth to do that just because it's easier for us. Okay? So when we go from wuva to uva, what we're doing is we're pronouncing a shurik now instead of w. Okay? So this is probably the linguistic explanation for why this happens. Okay. Ross does not give you a letter C here, but I'm going to add a letter C. He actually mentions this in his very first paragraph when he introduces the coordinating conjunction vav. But I think that it deserves to be down here for a simple reason. This is another situation where the conjunction is not like the inseparable prepositions, okay? So over here, let me just write all of them together. V, B, L, K, right? I'm sorry that those almost look like equal signs, but they're supposed to be double dots for the Shiva symbol, right? Okay, so they all are prefixed, and they all pretty much look the same there. They behave similarly, except in these situations under point 3 in my little discussion. Here is one area where the vav conjunction is not like the inseparable prepositions. The conjunction vav does not eat hay sandwiches. Okay? That is to say, remember when our inseparable prepositions bet, kaf, lamed, when they are written in front of an article hay, what do? Chomp, chomp, chomp. They eat the hay sandwich, right? So if I take ha melech, and I want to say, instead of ha melech, the king, to the king, le ha melech, what happens to the hay? It gets eaten, lamed slides over, takes its place, and so I end up writing this as simply la melech, right? So the hay is gone. It's pathak and doubling dot in the mem. Those are still visible. On the other hand, let's say I have Hamelech, the king, and I want to say and the king. Okay? Can I add a v in front of there? Yeah, I have to be able to add a conjunction, right? Will the vav swallow the hay here? No. So this is a-okay. Vav does not like eating hay. Now, here's a little silly story to help you remember this. Do you see the bet, lamed, and kaf over here that I've written to the left? I want you to compare the width of those to the vav. These are fat letters, aren't they? When you compare the bet, lamed, and kaf, they're fat. The vav is a skinny consonant. He's like a toothpick, isn't he? The beanpole. Why is he so skinny? Doesn't eat hay, right? You want to get your cattle fat and your horses fat, you feed them hay. They get fat, right? Bet, lamed, and kaf, they're wide, big, fat letters. Vav is skinny. Doesn't eat hay. All right? They don't eat any hay sandwiches. So you can put the conjunction vav before the hay. The hay will stay where it is. Okay? That makes sense? Maybe it doesn't make sense, but at least it'll preach, right? You can preach about this. All right. Number 4. Number 4. The conjunction vav sometimes changes to the vav, not with a vocal shava, but a vav with the kametz right here. This can happen. Okay, so this little symbol means that it becomes this. Okay, when does that happen? It can happen before accented syllables. Okay, you could see this before an accented syllable. You're given an example of lechem v'mayim. Okay, so if we take the word mayim, for example, the way to say and water, okay, notice that the ma in mayim is accented. There's 2 ways that I could see this written. I could see it with the shurik, umayim, right? Because mem is what kind of a consonant? It's one of my bump consonants, right? It's a bilabial, the mem is a bilabial, so the vav could become a shurik. The other possibility for the vav is that it could become va-mayim with a kametz right here. Why? Well, look, do you see the accent mark there? That is a tone syllable or a stressed syllable. And so sometimes that vav will have a vocal shava that opens up and becomes a full kametz, va-mayim. All right? So that is a possibility. That's a possibility. I don't want you to stress or obsess over the fact that this can happen. I really just want you to be aware that in the Hebrew Bible, it does happen, and when you see it, don't be surprised or shocked, okay? You can see a va with that long A. So to summarize, the conjunction vav is going to be pointed in these ways. Most commonly like this, second most commonly like this, third most commonly like that, and probably the least common, if there's a yod with a vocal shva under it, it'll be V, like that. Okay? So those are the ways you're going to see the vav. So the real important point here is that when you see any word starting with a vav that looks like any of these, then that's the conjunction. Okay? Just want you to recognize that it is that and why these become what they are. Now, the last thing, excuse me, we need to say about the conjunction is in 7.4 of Ross, this is 7.4, is how you translate it. Okay? Let me distinguish these 2 scenarios. If the vav is joining non-sentences, okay? If it's just joining nouns or adjectives or prepositional phrases together, your go-to translation value is and. Jack the Jill. How would you translate that? Jack and Jill. What all did Jack and Jill do? Jack and Jill went up the hill and fetched a pail of water, right? I'm not joining whole sentences together. I'm just joining parts of sentences. So I'm going to translate the vav as and in those situations. Now, if, on the other hand, if the joins whole sentences, then I have some options, okay? And it really is a matter, in this case, it really is a matter of thinking about the semantics of the first sentence and how that would relate to the semantics of the second sentence, okay? You really have to think about this. Your most common translation is probably going to be and, because usually when you state one sentence and then you start another sentence with the, it's just joining the two sentences in the most natural way of being closely conjoined entities. I went to the store, I bought milk. How would you translate that? I went to the store and I bought milk. They're semantically giving you a sequence of events. There's nothing contrastive about those two sentences as they go together. If, on the other hand, I have a sentence and then I have a the joining a second sentence, so sentence number one, sentence number two, and the second sentence is contrastive in relation to the first sentence, I think about what the first sentence means, and semantically the second sentence is contrastive notion, then I am probably not going to want to translate that vav as and, but as but. Okay? So let me give you an example. John went to the store, he didn't buy milk. You go to the store, you expect to be able to buy what you want, right? At least in America. Soviet Union, all bets are off on that. The old Soviet Union, you couldn't buy anything. But, pardon the pun, John went to the store with the expectation he's going to buy what he wants. He didn't buy milk or couldn't buy milk. That's counter to expectations. There's a kind of contrastive notion here. I could translate my vav there as but. John went to the store, but he couldn't buy milk. You see? I love peanut butter, you love chocolate. How will I translate the vav there? I love peanut butter, but you love chocolate, because I'm contrasting these two things. The Lord knows the way of the righteous, the way of the wicked will perish. That's a vav, but those are contrastive notions. I would translate that as, but the way of the wicked will perish. Okay? So, sometimes, if the sentences are joined together in such a way that the second sentence isn't really conjoining two equal ideas and it's not equally contrastive, I could have a situation where the vav is introducing another sentence that's actually almost parenthetical or is an aside to the prior sentence. And when that's the case, I might translate it as something like now. Like, as in, now the serpent was really crafty, right? I'm giving you parenthetical information. In Hebrew, that's a vav that starts that sentence. Now, the serpent was really crafty, and you need to know this before I get on with the story. So those are your possibilities. The really important thing for me to point out here is this. I could just give you this sort of formula. The equals and, but, or now. Okay? And if you saw me write that down, you might say, oh, that's interesting. The conjunction vav has all these different meanings. And what I would argue is this. Technically, the conjunction vav, when it is joining sentences, doesn't really inherently have all those meanings. Those meanings are not a function of the word vav. Okay? Vav isn't this super magical pill that, does all these things. Really, all vav is it's a sentence boundary marker. Okay? It marks the beginning of a clause or a sentence boundary. How you translate it? How you translate it has to do simply with the semantics of the sentences in terms of how they relate to each other. Okay? All the vav is doing is it's marking the beginning of a clause.